In 1788, James Madison defined rule of law in Federalist 51. In framing a government which is to be administered by men over men, the greatest difficulty lies in this. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. Rule of law is essential to maintaining justice and equality within a republic. As such, it is promoted in the Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Section 2, which makes the Constitution the supreme law of the land, and binds all government authorities, as well as their constituents, to an obligation to support the Constitution.
Rule of law ensures legal equality between the highest government officials and individuals, where the rights of the few are balanced against those of the many. The philosophy is promoted within the introduction of the Declaration of Independence, which asserts that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This affirms that every individual in a society is accountable under the same legal principles.
The rule of law is not universally applied. In places such as Afghanistan, an estimated 80% of all criminal and civil disputes are resolved outside the legal system, through forums called jirgas, a form of community mediation that leaves tribal customs to supersede rule of law. Afghans perceive this as being less corrupt, less costly, and more legitimate, due to the widespread, deep-seated resentment against their own system of government. However, these forums typically fail to acknowledge individual rights and tend to exclude women from participating, therefore undermining the rule of law. The Magna Carta, written in 1215, was one of the first documents that expressed the principle of rule of law. It asserted that the king was just a subject under the law, establishing a level of equality between barons and the nobility.
This principle was later reiterated in the English Petition of Rights in 1628, though this document was explicitly changed to include the peasants. However, the problem that rule of law faced was its inability to be enforced. After the Declaration of Independence, the idea of rule of law was reinforced by the listing of rights and limitations within the Constitution, which further signified America's determination and commitment to philosophy. Rule of law theoretically sets a standard of equality, putting the government and individuals on an eye-to-eye basis. Coining it as a contagion of sovereignty, Harvard professor David Armitage recognizes that rule of law establishes a constancy that appeals to foreign countries. The ideal represented in the various influential documents of America's history is often replicated by revolutionaries seeking justice and democracy for their own country.
The Declaration of Independence states, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Vietnamese Declaration of Independence from France, written by Ho Chi Minh in 1945, echoes the statement, all the people of the earth are equal from birth, all the people have a right to live, to be happy, and free.
The global effect of the Declaration of Independence has represented the readiness of foreign countries to promote the ideas of equality under the rule of law. In the United States Constitution, the 14th Amendment states, no state, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law or deny to any person with its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. This simple distinction of all persons instead of citizens furthers America's commitment to rule of law, which can be applied to other countries.
People living in nations where the rule of law isn't enforced covet the U.S. commitment to rule of law. In Syria, where the President Bashar al-Assad has repeatedly slaughtered hundreds of his people, the rule of law is a bleak hope. In the United States, the President is held under the same restrictions as normal citizens. The government is obliged to control itself, and it does so within the impeachment and removal processes delineated in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, as well as with the checks and balances incorporated into the setup of our government. Thank you.
Why is Magna Carta the foundation of the rule of law?
The Magna Carta serves, or I guess has a place in history as one of the first documents that started to question the universal authority of the king. So in this instance, it was still nobility and still barons, but they were requesting that the king be held accountable to the same legal principles that apply to themselves.
It opened up the door for new forms of government where it isn't necessarily just the monarch who's in power and all rights or all power are God-given and only given to him. It allowed powers to be delegated to people of lower ranks.
How has the 14th Amendment redefined the rule of law?
The 14th Amendment holds hold states accountable to the same legal principles or ideas of justice that the national or federal government has passed. So in this instance, it was, or to be more specific, it was passed after the Civil War, and it was holding states accountable to new citizenship rights that the national government was recognizing, and it prevented states from discriminating based off of race, so holding states and federal government on the same level.
Does or can the rule of law exist at the local level, and if so, how? So it involves like countries abiding by the same rule of law.
It would be hard for all of the countries to abide by the rule of law, considering that all countries don't have the same form of government. Understanding that rule of law creates establishes that everyone is equal under the same laws, it wouldn't be so for different forms of government, such as communism or not communism, but like under a country who's ruled by a dictator.
If other countries could recognize the government and the laws of different countries, I believe rule of law could be enforced, not necessarily having the same set of laws for all countries, but having a mutual respect between the countries and how they operate.
Rule of law is best enforced on a nation-to-nation basis, mainly because there's different legal systems that are unique to individual countries that kind of distinguish one nation from another. We have the United Nations, which I wouldn't say serves as a rule of law, but is certainly an attempt to get all nations in the entire globe to cooperate with one another, and even that, while it does provide a precedent and something to, or standard to respect, as my colleague David put it, it is not necessarily enforced unless individual countries choose to enforce that rule.
So if and when can the rule of law be set aside?
Rule of law is often set aside in times of warfare. For example, during World War II, the Japanese were interned in the United States, and this was subverting rule of law for what was deemed at that time a national or an act of national safety.
So you mentioned in your testimony that the president follows by the rule of law because he's held accountable through the impeachment process. But part of the impeachment process is that he won't be prosecuted after impeachment. Is that actually the rule of law? So he won't be accountable because of citizens? Right, isn't that part of the impeachment process?
Where does it say that?
Okay, in the Nixon case, he wasn't prosecuted, right? He was just impeached and brushed aside. So is that, yeah, okay, he was part of it, sorry, I'm messing that up. Was he held accountable by the rule of law in that instance?
Reverse your question.
Okay. So you mentioned that the president is held accountable to the rule of law through the impeachment process, but with President Nixon, who was part of after received by his predecessor, was he fairly, or was the rule of law fairly upheld in this instance?
President Nixon didn't necessarily admit to anything, he just resigned. So, in a sense, rule of law may not apply in this situation.
I think the rule of law is still upheld because, like many other ideals, the rule of law is simply an ideal and it's going to fail at times. And I think that's applicable to just the justice system in general. So I mean, you have certain people who may commit a crime, and for example, the O.J. Simpson case, you have all records pointing to a certain conclusion, and things end up having a different conclusion or different ruling than you expected. So that's just evidence that the world isn't perfect. Sometimes things don't work out the way you think